It's strange how you can know someone for years, and yet one unexpected trip can turn everything you thought you understood upside down. I had always been the cautious one between us, more comfortable with a book in my hands than a hiking pole. Brandon, on the other hand, thrived on movement, on adventure. He was the kind of guy who could make climbing a steep trail sound like an afternoon stroll. So when he suggested a weekend trip into the mountains to unplug and catch up like old times, I agreed, even though a tight knot had already started forming in my chest. Maybe I just missed him too much to say no. We'd been best friends since freshman year of college, an easy friendship built on late-night gaming sessions, trashy diner food, and a million inside jokes that no one else found funny. Over time, life had pulled us in different directions: jobs, relationships, moves. But Brandon had this way of crashing back into my life like no time had passed at all, smiling that stupidly bright smile and making it impossible to remember why I'd ever let distance grow between us. The cabin we rented was tucked into the foothills, a weathered little thing with creaky floorboards and a porch that sagged under the weight of years. It smelled faintly of pine and something older, like the ghosts of 100 memories we hadn't made yet. Brandon immediately tossed his backpack onto one of the 2 twin beds and flopped down with a groan, stretching out like a contented cat. I caught myself staring a second too long at the way his t-shirt pulled across his chest, at the casual sprawl of his legs, and quickly busied myself unpacking. It was stupid. He was straight, always had been. I was the one nursing a quiet, impossible ache. Still, it was hard not to notice the way the late afternoon sunlight caught in his hair, making it look like spun gold. Or the way he tossed a teasing smile over his shoulder when he caught me glancing. "What?" He laughed, ruffling his hair. "You look like you're about to bail already." I forced a grin and tossed a sock at him. "Just wondering how long it'll take you to start complaining about the lack of Wi-Fi." He chuckled, the sound low and easy, and I felt it settle somewhere deep inside me. The weekend hadn't even started yet, and already I could feel the fragile balance between us beginning to shift, like standing at the edge of a cliff and wondering whether to step forward or turn back. Maybe it was already too late. Brandon and I had always been a study in opposites. Where I was cautious, he was reckless. Where I overthought everything, he lived almost entirely on impulse. Somehow that difference had never driven us apart. It had stitched us closer together, balancing out the places where the other faltered. College had been a blur of messy dorm rooms, midnight convenience store runs, and countless late nights spent talking about nothing and everything. There was a comfort in it, a rhythm we'd fallen into so naturally that I hadn't realized how rare it was until I got older and saw how easily most friendships fractured over time. But not us. Somehow, even years later, even after life got busier and messier, we still found our way back to each other. "Remember that time you tried to build a campfire and almost lit your hoodie on fire?" Brandon said as he adjusted the straps of his pack. "We were hiking the first trail near the cabin, our boots crunching against the gravel path." "I maintain that it was a controlled flame," I said, grinning. He barked out a laugh, shaking his head. "Yeah, controlled right up until you started flailing around like a muppet. Hey, you're the one who poured an entire bottle of Gatorade on me instead of just, patting it out like a normal human being." His laughter echoed through the trees, warm and unguarded. God, I had missed that sound. It was easy, slipping back into this bubble where time bent and stretched and none of the real world mattered. It was easy to forget that every now and then I'd catch his gaze lingering on me just a little too long. Or that when he bumped into me on the trail, his hand would linger at my back a moment longer than necessary, steadying me. We made it to a clearing around noon, tossing our packs down beside a fallen log. Brandon immediately stretched out on the grass, arms behind his head, his shirt riding up just enough to reveal a sliver of skin. I looked away so fast I almost gave myself whiplash. "You good?" he asked, half laughing, half breathless from the hike. "Yeah," I muttered, pretending to dig through my bag for snacks. Just hungry. Hungry for what exactly? He teased, and there was something light but pointed in his voice that made my heart stutter. I chucked a granola bar at him and he caught it with one hand, grinning like an idiot. We spent the next hour lazily chatting about everything. Terrible. Jobs we'd quit. Relationships that fizzled out. Wild dreams we hadn't admitted to anyone else. Every now and then his knee would bump against mine, and even though the touches were casual, each one left a trail of warmth in their wake, lingering far longer than they should have. As the afternoon wore on, dark clouds started rolling in. From the west, thick and heavy. You think we can make it back before it pours? I asked, glancing at the sky. Brandon shrugged, ever the optimist. Probably. If not, I guess we get a little wet. Won't kill us. Spoiler. It absolutely did not go as planned. Halfway back, the skies opened up in a torrent of cold, stinging rain. We sprinted through the trees, slipping and laughing and cursing, totally soaked by the time we burst onto the porch of the cabin. Perfect timing, Brandon gasped, peeling his drenched hoodie over his head. Water streamed from his hair down his neck, and I had to physically force myself to look away, my heart hammering. Inside, we quickly discovered another minor problem. Somewhere between planning and packing, we'd both assumed the cabin had enough bedding. It didn't. One decent sleeping bag, one threadbare blanket, two very wet and very cold guys. Brandon tossed me a sheepish grin, holding up the single sleeping bag. Guess we're cuddling for warmth, huh? I tried to laugh it off, but my throat felt tight. Yeah, real survivalist stuff, just like the movies. He wiggled his eyebrows dramatically, trying to make me laugh, and it worked. It always did. But under all the joking, there was something new simmering between us, something neither of us was ready to name out loud. Yet. The rain didn't let up. If anything, it got worse, pounding against the cabin's thin roof like a million tiny fists, seeping chill into every crack and corner. We hung our soaked clothes by the fireplace, Brandon shirtless now, his skin catching the flickering light. I pretended to busy myself arranging the tiny pile of dry supplies, acutely aware of the way my eyes kept betraying me, darting back to him. Man, this is cozy, Brandon said, looking around with a laugh, completely unbothered by our predicament. He tossed the sleeping bag onto one of the twin beds and then flopped down beside it, arms stretched wide like he was claiming it by sheer force of will. I stayed standing, suddenly too warm despite the damp chill. So, you want me to take the floor? I asked, forcing casualness into my voice. Brandon raised an eyebrow. What? No way. There's enough room for both of us. Come on, dude. It's not like you bite. I hesitated. Just for a second too long. He caught it. Of course he did. And smirked. Unless you want to bite. In which case, hey, consent first. I barked out a laugh, shoving his foot lightly with mine. The easy banter was a lifeline, something to cling to when the ground under my feet felt increasingly unstable. I turned off the overhead light, leaving only the soft, gold glow of the fireplace. As I slid awkwardly into the sleeping bag beside him, every nerve in my body lit up like a live wire. The bag was barely wide enough for one person. Our shoulders pressed together, our legs brushed under the thin fabric. And he was so warm. You're stiff as a board, Brandon said after a few minutes, his voice half laughing, half sleepy. Gee, wonder why, I muttered, trying not to sound strangled. He shifted closer. God, he actually shifted closer and rested his head back against the pillow we were sharing. His arm brushed mine again, lazy and thoughtless, and I fought the urge to either bolt from the bed or lean all the way into him. The minutes stretched out painfully. The crackle of the fire, the rhythm of the rain, the sound of his breathing, all of it blurred into this dense, heavy thing between us. You ever think about... His voice was soft, almost hesitant. I turned my head slightly, heart hammering. About what? He shrugged a little, the movement sending a fresh shiver of sensation across my skin. I don't know. How things change. How people change. I swallowed. Sometimes. There was a beat of silence. Then he laughed, low and self-conscious. Man, listen. To me, getting all deep. Must be the rain. Makes people say dumb stuff. It's not dumb, I said, a little too quickly. He turned his head then, and for a moment we were looking at each other in the dim firelight. Too close, too much. His eyes were darker in the low light, softer, searching. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted so badly to close the gap, to just know what it would feel like, to stop wondering, stop aching, stop pretending. But the fear rooted me to the spot, fear of ruining what we had, fear that I was reading everything wrong, fear that one wrong move would shatter this fragile, precious thing between us. Brandon shifted again, propping himself up slightly on one elbow. His hand brushed my arm as he moved, light, almost absent-minded. But it felt deliberate somehow. Grounding. "You're thinking way too hard, man," he said, smiling that small, knowing smile that always made me feel like he could see right through me. "I can't help it," I admitted quietly. "Yeah," he said, his voice so gentle it made my chest ache. "I know." The air between us felt charged now, alive with everything we weren't saying. My skin buzzed with it. Every instinct screamed at me to do something, but I stayed frozen, caught between longing and terror. Brandon's fingers brushed mine under the blanket, slowly, carefully, like he was giving me the chance to pull away. I didn't. The contact was barely anything, just the barest press of fingertips. But to me, it felt like the world tipping off its axis. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was heavy with possibility. I shifted slightly, letting our hands settle together more fully, and he didn't pull away. His thumb moved in a slow, absent circle against the back of my hand, the smallest, most electrifying touch. My heart was beating so fast I was sure he could hear it. "I missed this," he said after a moment, so quietly I almost thought I imagined it. "Me too," I whispered back. Another beat. His forehead dropped lightly against mine, and I squeezed my eyes shut, overwhelmed by the closeness, the tenderness. It was everything I'd wanted, and everything I was terrified to have. But in that moment, wrapped in the warmth of the fire and the sound of the rain and the feel of him against me, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone. In it after all. The fire crackled low, throwing shadows across the cabin walls, and still we stayed like that, pressed together, breathing the same air, neither of us daring to move too much or speak too loudly, like we might shatter whatever delicate, invisible thing had settled between us. Brandon's hand was still in mine. He didn't let go. I could feel the way he kept stealing small glances at me, as if he was building up the courage for something, just like I was. The weight of everything unsaid hung heavier by the second, thick enough to choke on. Finally, he shifted, sitting up slightly and pulling his hand back, but only to run it through his hair, messing it up even more. His leg still touched mine, that one point of contact grounding me. "I feel like—" he started, then stopped, huffing out a frustrated breath. "I don't even know how to say this." My heart climbed into my throat. "Try," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He laughed, a short, nervous sound that was so un-Brandon it made my chest twist painfully. He paused again, rubbing at the back of his neck. "You ever have a moment where you realize you've been looking at something the wrong way for a long time, and suddenly it's obvious?" I swallowed hard. Yeah, he echoed, voice softer now. "I think I'm having one of those." He was still avoiding my eyes, staring instead at the blanket twisted between us like it held answers. I wanted to reach out, to pull his face toward mine, but fear rooted me in place. "You know," he went on, voice quieter now, "I used to think we were just best friends, like that's it, easy, no complications." "Me too," I lied, my mouth dry. He laughed again, but it cracked in the middle, like he didn't know whether to be amused or scared out of his mind. "But lately, especially on this trip, I don't know. It doesn't feel simple anymore." I sucked in a slow, shaky breath. "No," I agreed. "It doesn't." Finally, he looked at me. Really looked. And there was something raw and wide open in his gaze that made my stomach flip. His voice dropped even lower, almost a whisper. "I think about you differently now." The world narrowed down to the two of us. The rain, the fire, his voice, his eyes. I was dizzy with it. "I don't know when it started," he continued, his fingers clenching in the blanket. "Maybe it's been there a long time and I was just too stupid to see it." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I didn't trust myself to speak. Brandon dragged a hand down his face, then looked at me again, this time with something like fear flickering behind his usual bravado. "I'm scared," he admitted, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I'm scared to mess this up, scared to lose you, scared that if I say it out loud, everything will change." My heart was beating so fast I thought I might pass out. "Say it anyway," I whispered. He stared at me for a long, agonizing second, like he was searching my face for a sign that it was safe, that he wasn't about to jump into nothing. Then he let out a shaky breath and said very softly, "I think I'm in love with you." The room spun. The air left my lungs. Everything inside me cracked wide open. I closed my eyes for a second, just to steady myself, before opening them again to find him still there, looking terrified and hopeful all at once. "You don't have to say anything," he said quickly, misinterpreting my silence. God, I had to tell you. Even if you don't, I do," I cut in, my voice breaking on the words. "Brandon, I do." His mouth opened, like he wasn't sure he'd heard me right. "I've been trying not to," I went on, the words spilling out now in a rush, trying to shove it down, pretend it was just a phase or whatever. But it's not. It's never been. His hand found mine again, tighter this time, desperate. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" he asked, voice rough. "Same reason as you," I said, managing a small, shaky smile. "Scared." We sat there in the flickering firelight, the silence stretching between us again. But this time, it was different. Not empty. Full. Brandon leaned in, hesitating when he was just a breath away, giving me the chance to pull back if I needed to. I didn't. Slowly, achingly slowly, our foreheads pressed together. His nose brushed mine. His breath hitched against my mouth. And then, finally, he kissed me. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't some movie scene kiss full of fireworks and music. It was awkward and too soft at first, both of us hesitant, scared to push too hard. But God, it was real. I kissed him back, and something in him broke loose. A soft, desperate sound low in his throat. And he cupped my face with one hand, deepening the kiss with a tenderness that made my chest ache. I wrapped my arms around him, pulling him closer, and he melted into me like he'd been waiting for this just as long as I had. When we finally broke apart, we stayed tangled up together, breathing hard, grinning like idiots. "I can't believe we were both so stupid," he murmured against my skin. "Better late than never," I said. And he laughed, that real laugh I loved so much, before pulling me back in for another kiss, this one slower, deeper, filled with all the things we hadn't known how to say before. When we finally pulled back again, He rested his forehead against mine, eyes closed. So, he said after a moment, voice rough with emotion. What happens now? I smiled, threading my fingers through his. Whatever we want. He let out a breath that sounded suspiciously like a sob and kissed my knuckles one by one. Good, he said, because I'm not going back to just pretending you're just my friend. Me neither, I whispered. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, for the first time in what felt like forever, I was home. The fire had burned down to embers, a soft orange glow bathing the cabin in warmth, but neither of us made any move to rebuild it. We were too wrapped up in each other. Brandon shifted, pulling me closer until I was half in his lap, his arms loose, but sure around me. It was so easy, so natural, like we were two parts of the same thing finally clicking into place. For a while we didn't talk, just breathed, smiled, stared at each other in quiet disbelief. You're really bad at pretending. You don't like me, I teased finally, nudging his ribs lightly with my elbow. He let out a low chuckle, the sound rumbling against my side. Yeah, took you long enough to figure it out. I figured it out, I protested, grinning. I just didn't want to risk it. He tilted his head, looking at me in that way he had sometimes, like he could see straight through me. I get that, he said quietly. But still, kinda wish you'd said something sooner. I snorted. Says the guy who needed to get trapped in a cabin by a storm before admitting anything. Details, he murmured, and dipped his head to kiss the corner of my mouth. It was ridiculously soft, so soft that it left me aching in a whole different way. You know, he said against my skin, his voice teasing, we're gonna have to figure out what this means when we're not stuck out in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. I leaned back just enough to meet his eyes. I was thinking about that. And? His thumb brushed lazily over the back of my hand, like he couldn't stand not touching me now that the dam had broken. I bit my lip, heart thudding. And I want it. Whatever it looks like. I want to try. His whole face lit up, relief and happiness chasing away the nervous tension he'd been carrying all night. Good, he said. Because you're kind of stuck with me now. I raised an eyebrow. Stuck with you? Yeah, he said, that cocky little smirk returning. You think you can kiss me like that and then just leave? Nah, no takebacks. I laughed, full and unguarded, and he grinned like he'd won a prize. You're an idiot, I said fondly. You're idiot, he corrected, eyes crinkling at the corners. Rolled my eyes, but I couldn't fight the smile stretching across my face even if I tried. There was something so easy about this now, even with the nerves still thrumming quietly under the surface. Like we'd finally stepped into a world that had been waiting for us all along. He sobered a little, one hand coming up to brush a strand of hair out of my face. But seriously, he said, voice lower now, I know it's not going to be all rainbows. And sunshine. I mean, we're both idiots about feelings for one. I snorted again. Massive idiots. And some people might not get it. Us. I nodded, feeling the weight of that settle between us. It wasn't a small thing. But when he squeezed my hand, I squeezed back, without hesitation. We'll figure it out, I said simply. He smiled then, this soft, awed thing that made my chest feel too tight. I think we will too. For a long moment we just looked at each other. Nothing rushed. Nothing forced. Just us. The storm raged outside, but in here it was nothing but warmth, safety, the promise of something new. Brandon leaned down again, and this time when he kissed me it was different. Less frantic, more sure. And somewhere, in the back of my mind I knew, whatever came next, whatever obstacles we'd have to face, we'd do it together. That thought settled deep in my bones, steady and certain. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. The storm had passed by morning. The air outside was crisp and clean, the scent of wet earth filling my lungs as I stepped out onto the porch. Brandon followed behind me, our shoulders brushing in that now familiar, easy way that made my heart skip every time. The world looked washed new, trees dripping with rain, the sun slicing through the last lingering mist. It felt fitting somehow, like we weren't the only ones starting over. Brandon bumped his shoulder into mine, grinning. "You're staring," I shrugged. "Just thinking." "About what?" he asked, tugging his hoodie tighter around him. His hair was still messy from sleep, and he looked perfect. I turned to him, letting myself really look this time, without the fear or hesitation that used to hold me back. "You and me," I said simply. "What happens now?" He smiled, softer this time. "You mean after we survive hiking back down the mountain?" I laughed, rolling my eyes. "Yeah, after that." He was quiet for a second, then reached out and threaded his fingers through mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. His thumb brushed over the back of my hand in slow, lazy circles that made my chest feel too tight in the best way. "I don't have all the answers," he said, voice low and honest. "But I know I don't want to go back to before." "Me neither," I said without hesitation. He squeezed my hand, grounding me. "We'll figure it out," he said, echoing what I'd told him the night before. His mouth quirked up at the corner. "Might take a few disasters, since we're both terrible at being normal." "Speak for yourself," I teased, nudging him with my shoulder. He laughed, head tipping back slightly, sunlight catching on his face. It was such a stupidly beautiful sight that I wanted to memorize it forever. "You're stuck with me, he said, more serious now. "For real?" "Good," I said, smiling so hard my cheeks hurt. "Because I was planning on being stuck, too." He pulled something out of his pocket then, a small, battered compass, the one he always carried but rarely used because he insisted he didn't need help finding his way. He pressed it into my palm, curling my fingers around it. "For when you need to find your way back to me," he said, cheeks pink but eyes steady. I stared at it, the weight of the gesture sinking deep into my bones. "I don't think I'm ever going to get lost again," I whispered. Brandon leaned in, forehead resting against mine, and for a moment there was nothing but the sound of the dripping trees and our breathing. "I'm serious," he said quietly. "Wherever you go, I want to be there too." "Then don't let go," I said. He didn't. Not when we packed up the cabin. Not when we started down the muddy trail, slipping and laughing and steadying each other. Not even when we hit the bottom of the mountain, tired and aching, but lighter than I could remember feeling in years. Our fingers stayed twined together like an unspoken promise, a quiet understanding that whatever storms came next, real or otherwise, we weren't facing them alone. At one point he glanced over, squeezing my hand so gently it felt like a secret meant just for me. He said, grinning, "next time I plan a trip, remind me to pick somewhere with less near-death experiences." I laughed, breathless and giddy. "Deal," I said, swinging our hands between us. And just like that, under the clearing sky, we kept walking forward, toward whatever came next, together.